Tennessee Informer. I hope you enjoyed yesterday's episode with veteran Art Garhart. It's so important that we honor our veterans, hear their stories, and learn from their experiences. Their memories and hard-earned wisdom disappear forever when they're gone. And that's why we're committed to preserving those conversations for future generations when we get the opportunity. I expect that I'll have more veterans on the show. I certainly hope so. If you didn't see the show, it's on the website. You definitely want to see it. You can look it up either by the date, yesterday's date, or you can just look at the, you can wait till next Monday if you want, because we're going to play it again next Monday in honor of Memorial Day. Great show, great guy. He's got an amazing story. And we actually found out there was a little bit more that he forgot to tell after we finished recording, but we may have him back again, so I don't want to spoil that. Anyway, moving on. Before we get, we were going to have Joe Wolverton tonight. Unfortunately, Joe had a serious health problem arise in his family, and he has to be there to take care of this person. So he's not going to be with us tonight. I apologize. We'll get him rescheduled and get him back on as soon as possible. Anyway, we're going to do our Trump update, quick Trump update. We have a video. All right, so that was the video. Anyway, I want to comment on a few things about that have happened recently. So you got the Comey seashells, the 8647. Now we know good and well he knew exactly what he was saying. There's no doubt in anybody's mind. And I hope that, I understand he's being investigated. I hope the Secret Service takes this serious. I hope he gets the same kind of treatment anybody else would if they made a threat against the President of the United States. You just can't do that. Whether you like him or not, you can't make a threat against the President of the United States. And this needs to be dealt with, and he needs no slack cut whatsoever, especially considering his background. He's head of the FBI. He knows the deal on this kind of stuff. Now, we have another issue. That was Comey. This is Coney, as in Justice Coney, Amy Coney Barrett. And once again, we have another Coney betrayal on the Supreme Court, attempting to undercut President Trump on deporting all these illegal immigrants. Now, not to confuse, there's been a couple decisions made real in the last few days. There was actually an 8-1 decision made today by the court, and I'll see if I can remember this right. The temporary protective status that was given to some of the Venezuelans, not necessarily Trinidad, but Venezuelans in general, that the court did allow that to be removed today. And so that is no longer in place. And so that's good news. But last Thursday, they had the hearing, or the Supreme Court heard the case, and there was a few things that were kind of backwards about this. Number one, it was the birthright citizenship issue that they heard on the 15th. Well, that was what they were supposed to hear. But what they really talked about and dealt with was lower district court judges issuing nationwide injunctions. I mean, they've done it left and right on everything. And these district federal judges, just doing nationwide. Well, that's wrong. I mean, they don't have that legitimate authority. And that is what Trump appealed to the court about. Well, in a 7-2 decision, they didn't really deal with the birthright citizenship issue, but they did deal with the issue of the injunctions. And apparently they're going to be allowed to stand. Trump is doing what he can to try to get rid of these people, and as of right now, the Supreme Court is going to allow 7-2, and the only two, you can figure out who the two were that made the right decision on this, and that would be Thomas and Alito. And they said, this is wrong. We don't even have jurisdiction here. We should not even be hearing this yet, because the lower court had not made the ruling on it yet, had not made a ruling on the issue of birthright citizenship. So it's not over yet, but in the meantime, it appears to me, if I understand it correctly, is they're going to allow these lower courts to keep issuing these nationwide injunctions. And Coney has been a disappointment. To be honest with you, Coney's been a disappointment, Gorsuch's been a disappointment, Kavanaugh's been a disappointment. And we only have two consistent Supreme Court justices, which I think most of us knew that, and that's Thomas and Alito. So we'll see how this plays out over the long term, but this is not a good thing. I mean, this plays right into the Democrats' lawfare operation. So they have to find, all they have to do is find a right judge to put a nationwide injunction, and this just slows the whole process down. So we'll see how things, this is another one of those cases that, in my opinion, Trump should just ignore this. He cannot allow himself to be hemmed in this way. Alito, in his dissent, mentioned the fact that the Supreme Court should not even have heard this case yet because the lower court has not made a decision yet. And that they're not supposed to be the first court that hears these type issues. And so, and he's right, of course, but Trump is going to have to ignore these rogue judges. There's no other way. If he continues to defer to them, we're not going to get rid of these people. We're not going to get rid of enough of them, not even enough of the most dangerous ones. So that's a real, real problem. There's something else I want to talk about just a little bit. Trump just came back from the Middle East and made a deal with Qatar and Saudi Arabia. It's one thing to do business with countries like that, like Saudi Arabia, and I understand we've had a long-term relationship with Saudi Arabia. But Qatar, and Qatar already has businesses and they already own property here in this country, and I have a big problem with that. But as I understand, part of this deal that he made with Qatar and with Saudi Arabia is they're going to be investing in businesses in our country. And I don't think that is a good idea, okay? Saudi Arabia, let's not forget, 19 of the 21 hijackers came from there. They've been known long-term for supporting Islamists. Qatar is known for financing jihad. They're known for that. One of the imams that was in one of their Sharia-compliant banks over there, I don't recall the name of the specific bank and probably couldn't pronounce it anyway, but he coined the phrase, that he basically coined it, the term that, Sharia-compliant finance was jihad with money. So it's not a good thing, in my opinion, that we're going to have them investing in our countries. Trade is one thing, that's bad enough. I think that's a serious mistake. There's some other mistakes along these lines, and I'm going to have to read this off of my phone here. Just bear with me a minute. That the administration has made, and they're just obviously they don't have anybody in their administration that has a clue on this, on Islam, on the threat of Islam. And if I can get this to pull up for me, John Guandolo, some of you may remember him. He's a retired FBI agent. He has a blog, and he actually does training. He does training for law enforcement. He does training for communities to teach them what to look for and how to fight back, not just against the Islamists, but the communists as well. And this is a battlefield update. I get the emails, and this is John Guandolo, Understanding the Threat. And this was written on the 17th, so that was Saturday. Yeah, Saturday. And the title is, Trump Administration Appoints a Terrorist to the U.S. Commission on Religious Liberty. And I'm going to read it for you right now. After inviting a Hezbollah leader to his inauguration, appointing Hamas/Muslim Brotherhood leaders to be ambassador to Kuwait and the U.S. Attorney for Los Angeles, and cutting deals with leading supporters of global terrorism, that would be Qatar and Saudi Arabia. I would throw in Iran in there as well, but we don't currently have a deal with them. Most of us thought things could not get worse in the Trump administration on this topic. We were wrong. Now, before I go to the next paragraph here, the Hezbollah leader, I remember that right before the inauguration, and there was enough of a fuss made up about it that the guy was uninvited. Some of you may or may not remember that. It appears key people inside the Trump administration are intentionally bringing terrorists into the White House to undermine U.S. national security. Friday evening, May 16th, the Trump administration announced the new names for the advisory board for the Commission on Religious Liberty. Included among the names of individuals to serve on the advisory board of lay leaders, and I'm sure I'll mispronounce this name, is, actually I can do one of these, were Ismail Royer and Sheikh Hamza Youssef. Hamza Youssef is an Islamic scholar, a Hamas/Muslim Brotherhood leader, and a supporter of Al-Qaeda and Hamas terrorists. Randall Todd Ismail Royer is a terrorist, a real terrorist. And I'm going to click on here, and this gives me a little more information about this guy. So, like I say, nobody in the Trump administration has a clue on this kind of stuff, apparently. All right, let's see. Okay, I've got to blow this up a little bit so I can read it. Okay, I'm going to skip some of this, and this is once again written by John Gondola. As an FBI agent, my squad at the Washington field office worked a case which came to be known as the Virginia Jihadi Network, which included a group of his jihadi/Islamic terrorists who trained with paintball guns in preparation for going overseas to fight for the Islamic cause. Ismail Royer played a prominent role in the case. In fact, Royer was sentenced to prison for his role in this case. Some of the highlights from Statement of Facts are below. Royer assisted co-conspirators in gaining entry to a jihad camp run by a designated foreign terrorist entity. In the mid-90s, Royer went to Bosnia to fight with the Muslim Brotherhood, or with his Muslim brothers, excuse me. He completed a 6-week jihadi training course and fought with the Mujahideen in battles. He trained at jihadi camps, helped in a variety of ways off the battlefield and supported the cause, participated in firing on Indian positions in Kashmir. When he returned, he continued to take actions to help foreign terrorist organizations, including recruiting others to fight for them. And he was sentenced to, April of 2004, he was sentenced to 20 years. He did do most of his time. Anyway, so this guy is a confirmed terrorist, not a suspected terrorist. But the Trump administration apparently has nobody in there. And I got to wonder about our current FBI. What does Kash Patel know? He should know something, but apparently not. Or this kind of stuff wouldn't be happening. So Trump's doing some great things, but everything Trump is doing is not necessarily great. So since we don't have Joe today, I'm going to talk about a variety of topics. If you have a question, bring it up in the chat room, and then Kevin will let me know what it is. Unfortunately, I can't read the chat on the screen from here. I would need glasses bigger than they make and able to be able to see that. But if you have a question, just bring it up to him. But in the meantime, I'm going to talk about it. I want to throw this out to you, and this is totally unrelated. I'm kind of jumping topics here. And this is a conversation I had with somebody who actually watches the program pretty regular. And this is something I thought of in the past, but I don't have all the details on it like the person I was talking to does earlier today. But, our country's in a mess. The budget, Trump's big, beautiful bill, which anytime it's a big bill, it's not beautiful. It's not beautiful for us. So much garbage gets piled into those. And it looks like we do have a few conservatives in the House that are saying, hey, this is not going to happen. We're not going to support it. There's no cuts. We got DOJ supposedly eliminating waste, but then we're going to pass a budget that has more spending than the DOJ cuts have made. It doesn't make any sense. So there has to be cuts. Now, having said that, before I forget this coming Wednesday, we are supposed to have Representative Rose, who is running for governor. He's the first announced candidate running for governor. He's supposed to be on the show Wednesday because they anticipated when we booked this last week that everything would be done by then. I'm kind of doubtful now because I saw something online today that, hey, There's no way this thing is going to be done by Wednesday. So hopefully he still makes it. Now, if we do get him on the show, obviously we'll talk a little bit about D.C., but the main focus will be asking him what he intends to do as governor. And I personally have several questions to ask him. And I'm sure some of you from the chat room will as well. I will try to get to yours. But that's just letting you know that's what's coming up. But that may or may not happen. And now that they're having this budget fight, which they need to have. We don't need to just pass one big, beautiful bill that doesn't cut anything. That's ridiculous. I mean, Moody's just downgraded our debt, our credit rating. And I'm surprised that hasn't happened sooner. I'm surprised it hasn't been, that seems to me like that's probably 10 years late. So we have to fix this. And spending more is not fixing it. Kicking it down the road is not fixing it. So one of the big ticket items every year is Social Security. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, those are probably the top three, and then defense. And remember, we're borrowing almost everything. We're spending what, $1 trillion? Is it $1 trillion every year now just on interest? It took our country from the founding till 1980 to accrue $1 trillion debt. Now here we are 45 years later, and our yearly interest on the debt is $1 trillion. Guys, we're this is Weimar territory. I'm talking about the Weimar Republic in Germany. Wheelbarrows full of marks that were worth nothing. I mean, this is dangerous. This is a national security issue as well. Yeah, and we're headed that way. It definitely looks that way. So one thing I want to kind of get your feel for, and I want to throw this out there. Like I say, this is based on a conversation with somebody I talked to today, and like I said, had thought of the topic before, but I have nowhere near the amount of information this person does. Social Security. Now, if anybody's already on Social Security, and we know in many cases some people that's their main source of income. There's retirees that is their main source of income. But those of us who are not on it yet, and especially those out there listening that may not be anywhere close to it, and if you're like me and I'm not that many years away from it, I'm not confident it will be there. I haven't been confident it'll be there for probably 10 or 15 years. And some of you that are considerably younger than me, maybe you've been investing and you just really see that money that goes out of your check every month to Social Security as a waste, and you're like, I really wish I could take that and invest it. I'm just curious, and I'd like to hear from somebody in the chat, your thoughts on if given the opportunity, if you were given the opportunity, or if we could demand it some way, somehow, I'll take a payout. What I've paid in with some reasonable interest, and I'm done. You give me back everything I paid, along with some interest, and I'll opt out. And you don't have to worry about me. It's all on me. Number one, everybody knows Social Security is not constitutional. Nothing in the Constitution authorizes the federal government to do that. Neither is Medicaid, Medicare. Now, we're not going to get to constitutional government overnight. We got that. There's just no way to do it. We're not going to be able to go, unless we have a big enough crash, I suppose, which maybe the debt will do that. But just imagine if a lot of people, if this was a possibility, could cash out and get what we paid in with some reasonable interest back. And we become responsible for our retirement. And what you do with that money is your business. Maybe you're just going to pay off debts. Maybe you think, okay, I've got another pension. If I just pay off my debts, that will be money well spent. You get the money. You don't have to wonder, am I going to live to Social Security, or is Social Security going to run out before I get there? But I think it could be, and it would be, if you were able to do this, and let's say that they made it available to do this, and let's say even a third of the population said, yes, give it to me now. Now, I understand That's still a lot of money. And I couldn't tell you how much it would be, but certainly it wouldn't be any more wasteful than what we're doing now with everything else. All the money we're spending overseas, all the money on all the other garbage. But just imagine, I mean, this is not the same thing, but remember back during COVID when we got all those checks, those stimulus checks. I mean, that did help stimulate the economy to some degree. It was not a good way to do it, but I'm just curious if anybody out there on the chat line would like to chime in on, hey, would you be interested? Would you take a payout? What would be a reasonable payout? What's a dollar amount that, hey, I would have to have at least X number of dollars before I'd even consider it? You know, because if something like this were to come to pass, and I know it's a long shot, I know it's a stretch, but if something like this were to come to pass, you know, people would have to look at it and say, well, do I want to wait and it maybe not be there? Or if I take it now, what is the minimum that would make it worth my while? So just something to think about. And if there's any comments, nothing yet. Okay, love to hear them, no problem. Anyway, so that's just one thing that I was thinking about. Another thing I want to bring up, you know, next year will be the 250th anniversary of the founding of our country. Now, as I understand it, the Trump administration plans on making this a big celebration. And that's good. We definitely need to do that. But there's going to need to be a lot of education. And I'm not confident that even though Trump has good intentions, that the people that will be put in charge of that will really have a good grasp on the founding and not be politically correct. But, you know, here's the deal. We don't have to wait on D.C. or even our state. You know, we could probably do things locally. And I am going to try to get more people on. And matter of fact, I want to do something for this upcoming 4th of July. The Monday prior, I want to find, and I've got a couple people in mind, and Joe is certainly a possibility, for the 30th to do a show on the Revolution, and so that people understand what it was all about. Because I don't think the average American has a good grasp of it. And I know that the other side, to include probably the administration, because like I say, don't have a lot of confidence that we'll get good people in charge of that. But we have to find ways to get the right information out to people, especially our younger people and our kids, of what it was all about. You know, if we're going to celebrate a revolution, and we should have a good grasp of what it was that they actually, and really it was more about independence than a revolution. The revolution was in their minds well prior to the first shot being fired. But to a great degree, it was really just about restoring and standing up for their rights as they understood them as Englishmen, as British citizens. That they felt, hey, these are our rights. These are our God-given rights. These are rights we've always had as free British citizens, yeah, and basic human rights. And that's more so than a revolution. The most revolutionary aspect of it, in my opinion, was that you had to do it by the rulers were only legitimate if they had the consent of the governed. That was probably the most revolutionary idea, in that, you know, that people could govern themselves, that you didn't have to have a monarch to govern them. And so the fight was mostly about rights that they already believed they had. And so I think people need to understand that, and they need to understand that a lot of the things that the British did, when you look at the Stamp Act and the Townshend Act, the Declaratory Act. I don't know if any of you have studied much of the Revolution, but you know, you had the Stamp Act, which everybody hated. Later you would have the Tea Act, but the Stamp Act was in like 1765. It was not a huge amount, piddling amount, But it wasn't the amount, it was the principle. And that's what a lot of the founders tried to relay to the people. John Dickinson, known as the poet of the Revolution, he pointed out these things. If you accept this little encroachment on your right, on your freedom, then they're going to push a little more the next time, a little more the next time. So that's what it was about. So anyway, they did successfully get them to end the Stamp Act for a short period of time. When they lifted it, then they issued the Declaratory Act. Well, the Declaratory Act basically said, the British government basically said, we as Parliament, and this is my paraphrase, have the right to legislate for the colonies on any topic whatsoever. So, I mean, that anybody that doubted at that point what they had in mind, that should have removed all doubt. And of course, later on, they brought back, I think it was the Townshend Act that replaced the Stamp Act, later on the Tea Act. But it was the fact they didn't have any representation. It was the taxation without representation. It was legislation without representation. It was these people 3,000 miles away legislating for them when they had always legislated for themselves. And now they were no longer allowed to. So there's a lot of the same thing. As a matter of fact, if you look at the long train of abuses in the Declaration of Independence, I think that long train of abuses in the Declaration of Independence pales in comparison to the garbage that we have accepted from our federal government since the 1930s at least. Now, the problems with our federal government and federal overreach go well beyond that. You start around the 1860s, but there's some other thoughts even prior to that. But really, after we passed the income tax, after we did away with the direct electing of the states of the senators by the legislature, which I want to talk about that here again in a minute, or some more in a minute. But once the 30s come, once FDR gets in office, and yes, I know Wilson did a lot of bad things, but I think after FDR, it just grew and it grew and it grew, and now, everybody expects Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, and all the rules and regulations that come with that. We can't want small government and accept big government over here. There's no way that our country can continue on the path that it's on. The only way to do that is for us to understand what that Constitution, what the intent of it was. It was to limit government. If I've said 1,000 times before on this show, the only way to be successful at that and to make that happen is to have our state governments. Of course, most of them addicted to the federal government. Tennessee, 40% of its budget comes from the federal government. So it's not going to be an overnight deal. But, we're going to celebrate a revolution here at 250th, yet we are nothing like those people. We don't even, for the most part, our society doesn't even understand the key issues. They don't even understand the mindset. I'm not even sure most of our country would accept the mindset. I mean, so many of us have been programmed to just do whatever the federal government says, and that, the federal government has the right to do X, Y, and Z. And it doesn't, but we've allowed it. Once you let the monster grow and let him do it's just like a child. Whatever you let a child do, they'll continue to do, and then they'll do more. You've heard about the spoiled kids. They start off with little brats, and the parents don't do anything about it. And then by the time that kid is a teenager, the parents are afraid of that kid. Well, now that kid is an adult, and the parent's old and weak, and now they're terrified of that kid. They're terrified of that creation. So we got an ugly road ahead. Like I say, Trump is doing some good things. Trump is not going to save our country long term. He's not going to save our country long term. I don't even think he has the same concept of certainly of the founding generation. Most of our elected officials don't. Most of our people don't. But I just encourage everybody to continue to read and learn and try to teach your family and try to teach your friends. We're not going to vote our way into restoring our country. It's not going to happen. And I think we're probably going to have some ugly times ahead. Like I say, Trump is doing some great things, but he cannot fix it. Not inclined to fix it. Only the states can fix it. They won't fix it unless we demand it. We're going to have to keep demanding it. Now, this Wednesday, if I do get Representative Rose, if he is able to make it, we'll be talking primarily about why he wants to run for governor. And as I mentioned, I'm going to have questions. So that's something to be thinking about. What do we want? I know I want a governor that's not just going to bow down anytime the federal government says bow down. And that's pretty much what we've had. That's pretty much what every state has had for all my whole lifetime, and probably everybody in the audience. Governors just essentially do what they're told. Oh, they might do a press release and they might say this or say that, but most of them roll over. And most of the legislators as well. Legislatures, they do the same thing. So we don't want that. Internally, some things to think about. Do we want a governor who doesn't understand our Declaration of Rights that's right up in front of our state constitution? I want one that will actually take that serious. And so I think, as this election process goes on, like say he's the first guy in there, and understand, me having him on is not an endorsement in any shape or form. This is, hey, he's the only guy in the race. Hear what he has to say, but I've got a lot of questions. Because I know that Tennessee's not going to get any better if we elect another Bill Haslam type or another Bill Lee type. Either one of them, we don't need any more of those. We need somebody different. We need somebody who actually understands and respects both the U.S. and the state constitution. We need somebody that understands that the Constitution of the state of Tennessee did not create a strong governor. The legislature is where the power is supposed to be. We need one that won't send his minions down to a committee to kill a bill. Won't extort legislators. Well, if you don't support my legislation there, Representative, then your community won't get X, Y, or Z. Or hey, if you don't pull your bill, then there will be a price to pay for your constituents. That kind of stuff goes on all the time. I know it's not new. Neither Bill Haslam or Bill Lee invented that, but boy, they have it down pat, don't they? So just be thinking about that as we go through this governor's race in 26. We got to have somebody that understands and respects both constitutions. And we'll have to see. I did talk to Representative Rose a couple of weeks ago. Overall, decent impression. Seems like a decent guy, but I'm not looking for a decent guy. I'm looking for somebody who knows and will uphold their oath to the Constitution. And that's what everybody should be looking for. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully he's still able to make it Wednesday. I've got a feeling they're going to be locked in a struggle over this budget, this big, beautiful bill, as Trump likes to call it, which is, as I said earlier, not cutting anything. Kevin, do we have any questions or comments yet from? Okay, let's hear it. On Second Amendment? Okay, well, the issues surrounding the Second Amendment in Tennessee specifically. So if we don't really have constitutional carry in the state of Tennessee, even though they passed a bill a few years ago and Lee labeled it as constitutional carry. It's not constitutional carry. We still have this intent to go armed clause in our code, TCA code. And I can never remember the number, but bottom line is it's an offense with the intent to carry a gun or a club with the intent to go armed. Well, I don't know how you carry it without the intent to go armed. Never figured that part out yet. But how can you say you have constitutional carry yet that is still on the books. How can you say you have constitutional carry and you can't carry a long gun in the state? And you can have it in your vehicle. You can have any gun in your vehicle. That's not a problem in your vehicle. But once you step outside, that's the problem. We in Tennessee cannot use deadly force if needed to protect our property. We can only use it to defend life. Well, depending on the situation and where you're at, different jurisdictions might see that a little different. They may take your actions a little different. You know, right now you can't brandish that weapon to deter them. If somebody's on your property, middle of the night, they're breaking into your vehicle, they're attempting to break into your, you should be able to defend yourself. No questions asked. But we don't have that in Tennessee. Let's see, there's some other restrictions. And this one is not a state restriction, but just think about it. You go to a gun shop and they have to do a federal background check. Well, now the Second Amendment, I mean, what shall not be infringed? And remember, the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, were restrictions on the federal government originally. They were not restrictions on the state government. They were restrictions on the federal government. Yet, no matter what state you're in, you have to have a national background check. That's garbage. That's flat out. And the ATF, why do we have an agency that has that kind of authority? Now, Trump administration so far seems to be neutering ATF. I'd like to see them totally disbanded. I don't think they need to exist at all. And that's the way I think that should go. We'll see how that pans out. But we have these now in Tennessee. Part of the problem with the carrying of weapons, the other thing they've done is in 1870, when they redid the Constitution after the Civil War, they said the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. However, legislature may pass laws with a view to reduce crime. That's not the verbatim, but it allows the legislature to make laws with a view to reduce crime. Now, that's kind of vague there, or views. Obviously, that's not working in Memphis, not working in Nashville, not working anywhere. And there was a state Supreme Court case that said that the legislation had to be linked to lessening crime. Now, I don't think you can in any way, shape, or form prove, especially a lot of the things they've passed. For instance, you used to be able to carry your gun in let's say if you were going to the courthouse, in your courthouse, like most counties, it's got more than just the courtroom, and it does more than just hold court. You have your other county offices in there. You go in there to do vehicle registration, whatever. You used to be able to carry, if you had a permit, which you shouldn't need a permit in the Constitution to carry state, you're able to carry it in there. Well, then they passed it, and it's not that long ago, certainly within the last 10 years, I think within the last 5, to where you couldn't go in the courthouse at all with the gun. Before it was you could go in the building, you just could not go in the courtroom. But you could go in the building. Well, now you can't even go in the building. You've got the guys checking you with a wand before you go in there, make sure you don't have a weapon. It's ridiculous. It's another infringement. Just another infringement. So we've got a lot of things we need to straighten up in Tennessee. And in Tennessee, most of your elected officials, your Republicans at least, will tell you that they support the Second Amendment. And then they say, but. So we call them Second Amendment butters, all right? There's always an excuse. There's always an exception. Well, I support the Second Amendment, but law enforcement doesn't like this. Well, it doesn't say in the Constitution if law enforcement doesn't like something that your rights get infringed just because law enforcement doesn't like something. Law enforcement is law enforcement. What's the major law? Law of the land? That would be the Constitution, both federal and state. So we've got to do better on that. We don't have that. If you read, and I would encourage you to read the Tennessee State Constitution, I mean, they've if you read it, you understand how much our state violates it on a number of things. One thing is emergency powers of the governor. Guess what? He has none. Okay? Now, they did pass some legislation this year curtailing his emergency powers to a degree, and I apologize, I can't recall right off. I know Mark Pody had it in the House, and I think, what was his name? Mark Pody had it in the Senate, and I can't remember who had it in the House. And it did strip away, to some degree, the power of the governor to call, to do things during an emergency, to declare an emergency. But look, in state constitution, the governor can't declare an emergency. The Congress, the legislature has to call it. And if you look at the Declaration of Rights, right up front in our state constitution, it says that these rights, and there's like 36, they list like 36 of them, they're off limits. They're not subject to legislation under any reason whatsoever. There's no excuse, no exceptions. That's right up front. Yet, during COVID, what did Bill Lee do? And fought tooth and nail this year against people that were trying to uphold the Constitution by passing legislation that prevented him from doing what he did during COVID. So these guys don't believe, most of them do not believe the oath they took. They took an oath, but it doesn't mean anything to them. So that's another, there's a lot of other things that, like I said, big thing too is the way they operate during the session. Governor sending down minions to testify against a bill. You know what? If the governor of the state of Tennessee doesn't agree with the bill, whoever the governor is, then he vetoes it. That's his call. He can veto it. Guess what? State of Tennessee, the same simple majority that passed it can override his veto. Yet they act like the governor's this powerful guy. He's powerful because they allow him to be. But who gets left out up there is the grassroots, the people. It seems like every session it's what the governor wants, what so-called leadership wants, what the lieutenant governor wants, what the speaker wants, and what all their enforcers want. In the House, you're talking Lamberth and, what's the guy's name that likes to pull down the pants on refs? Oh, yeah, Faison. And then in the Senate, of course, you're talking that worthless Jack Johnson. And then what's our degenerate lieutenant governor? McNally. Yeah. It's what they want. And they shut down, they kill good legislation in their own party because the people that are bringing forth legislation, either the legislation is too conservative and they don't want to really support it, or they're mad because that person stood up to them. And so they kill the legislation. Committees, GOP committees, supermajority, can't even get a motion and a second on a lot of legislation. That's just pathetic. We have a pathetic Republican supermajority in the state of Tennessee. Not just pathetic, but disgraceful. Rhinos, reptiles, and reprobates. That's what makes up the Tennessee supermajority. And we got to do better. So I hope the next governor, whoever it is, and I know it's early. I know we hear that Marsha is going to get in. You know, the one thing I know about this upcoming election is this. I don't know who I'm voting for. I know I'm not voting for Marsha Baker or Ward Blackburn. And those of you who follow state politics, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But yes, Marsha will. That's not somebody that I will support. Don't know who. I'm hoping there's still time for others to get in, and I'm hoping somebody else does get in. I am interested in hearing what Representative Rose has to say, and we'll give him a fair shot. I am going to ask some questions Wednesday, hopefully. If not, we'll try to get him on later. But we do need to be thinking about that. What do we want in a governor? And, you know, what we need, the way we need to push our state. We need a governor that will stand up to the federal government. We need a governor that supports nullification. Bottom line. I don't mean necessarily nullification just for a bill you don't like, but nullification for a bill that is obviously unconstitutional. We have to have that. That's the way it was designed. If you go read what the founders wrote, that's what it was designed to do. That's the way it was designed. They expected, they anticipated. In their mind, it would not have worked without the states being able to say no when the federal government got out of control. And I think we got plenty of evidence of that. You look at not just the last roughly 100 years, but you can go back further than that. And as states have acquiesced, the federal government's just got bolder and bolder and bolder, taking more and more power, and states have less and less. States become more and more dependent. That's part of the problem, is the financial dependency on the federal government. Our state reps don't want to be the ones who have to figure out how to cut if all of a sudden 40% of what they've been getting from the federal government was gone. If they were anywhere near even somewhat responsible, just based on our federal financial situation, they would have several years ago started something to cut back dependence a little bit at a time. 5% this year, maybe 3% next year. They could have done that, and we wouldn't have to worry when the federal government goes up, so to speak, when it crashes. I started to say something that I probably shouldn't say on TV, but when the federal government crashes, the states would not be necessarily stuck, because they could have weaned themselves off. That legislation was actually proposed to cut a few percentage points every year on our dependence. That was proposed 8 to 10 years ago by, at the time, Representative Judd Matheny. Haslam didn't want it. Didn't go anywhere. Can't have our state be self-sufficient. Can't have us, not tied to the federal government. So that's something we have to think, and that's another thing we have to push. That's going to be one of my questions for him. Hey, what are you going to do about reducing our... Talking about spending, good Lord, we got a $60 billion budget in the state of Tennessee. When Bill Haslam took office in whatever year that was, 2017? Whatever year. The budget from the Haslam administration was like 38 billion. Now, 60 billion. 60 billion, less than 8 years later. We're terrible. Financially, and they talk about how responsible we are. We're not responsible. If you're relying on 40% of your state budget from the federal government, and if you have increased your budget by that much in that short, you're not responsible. That's not fiscally responsible. That's irresponsible. And it's dangerous. Any comments in the chat? Any questions in the chat? Yeah. Memphis is a mess. Nashville's a mess. Hey, every big city's a mess, because the deal. The Democrats control the cities, but guess what? Has our Republican supermajority instituted any discipline in those cities? Have they done anything about those cities? Not that I can tell. And remember, the relationship between the state government and the cities is not the same as was intended between the states and the federal government. The counties and the cities are creations of the state of Tennessee. Okay, they didn't create the state. That's the situation that applies to the federal government. But the state created the counties and the cities, and they should be able to rein them in when they're out of control. Granted, you can't make the people elect good people, but you can punish them for being fiscally irresponsible. You can do something about situations like Memphis, where, it's a war zone. Now we got the FBI that's going to be, they just announced that Memphis was the murder capital of the country. And now they're going to come to, it shouldn't take that. Why is that something Tennessee couldn't fix? Why does the federal government have to step in and fix Memphis? Why couldn't Bill Haslam have fixed Memphis? Why couldn't Bill Lee fix Memphis? I don't understand that. So anyway, once again, hopefully we will have Representative Rose this Wednesday, 7 o'clock. Now, we're not going to do a show every Wednesday. In fact, this upcoming Wednesday will be the last Wednesday show for a while. The following Monday, Memorial Day, we're going to replay the show that we did with Art Gerhardt yesterday. That'll be for Memorial Day. The following Monday, on the 2nd, we're going to have Jeffrey Adicott again, Professor Jeffrey Adicott, but this time he's going to be talking about his Warrior Defense Project. He is a lawyer, and he defends a lot of the people who have deployed, who have been charged with BS charges of criminal acts or war crimes by our federal government. You know, when they sent them to Iraq and Afghanistan, put all these ludicrous rules of engagement on them, and he defends those people. So we're going to have him on talking about that program and, of course, the cases. So that's the 2nd. And I want to thank the audience for taking the time to watch our program tonight. We will get Joe rescheduled, getting back on here as soon as possible. Please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons, as well as the notification bell, so you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. Over 60% of our viewers have not yet subscribed. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe, and we really need your support to help keep us on the air and keep this project going forward. And when I say this project, you guys, if you've watched this for a while, I try to do a variety of things. I do some history, Constitution stuff, different political issues, threat issues like Islam. So it's kind of a mixed bag. And I like that. And hey, we're interested in if you got ideas and suggestions, send them. Since we, generally speaking, only have one show a week, understand it takes time. We won't necessarily get to you right away, but we'll try to get it on here. If you have, like I say, suggest topics or guests, get it to us, and we'll definitely take a look at it. Check out our audio podcast on iHeart, on Spotify, and other platforms as well. Sign up for our weekly newsletter at our website, teeninformer.com. And while you're there, send us an email to let us know of any guest or topic suggestions. Repeated myself there. I very rarely do that. Please find and follow us on Facebook and X. This Wednesday at 7 p.m., we'll have Representative John Rose, the only official gubernatorial candidate so far on the show. He'll tell us why he's running, and I'll have some questions. We'll try to take some questions from the chat room if possible. Next week, we will play our show from last night featuring Art Gerhardt, a 4-tour Vietnam veteran with 4 Purple Hearts, by the way, an amazing story to tell. This guy has seen some history. You got to watch the show. I mean, it's amazing that one person would have that many different experiences involving historical things and historical people and whatnot. So don't forget, Memorial Day is to remember those in service that didn't make it home. Hope you'll join us again next week. That's it for now. Good night from Paris, Tennessee, that is.